Hey everyone, it's the host of All Across America, Marco Vig, jumping in for a few seconds before the show to thank y'all for listening, to let you know that I want to hear from you. Tell me what you like about the show, and send me your suggestions too. Follow us on Instagram at AllXAmerica, or visit the website, allacrossamerica.net, and you can use our contact page there. If you want to support us, we're on Patreon at patreon.com/allacrossamerica. Try to respond personally to everyone who reaches out, so say hello. All right, on with the show. Podcasting from Portland East to Portland West, from Big Pine Key to Pacific Beach, and from San Juan to Guam, this is All Across America. We're here today with entertainment lawyer Nina Ameri. Nina has been representing creatives in the entertainment industry for over 20 years. She founded Ameri Law in 2019, though the firm is based in Beverly Hills, represents clients across America. And Nina, welcome to All Across America. It's an honor to have you on.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you having me.
All right. Well, maybe we could start with, did you ever have any interest in being an actor, a writer, or a producer, or did you feel like your contribution to the entertainment world was going to be in a different direction?
You know, people always ask me that. I never really wanted to be in front of a camera. I did a little bit of acting, you know, in elementary school, the school play, but beyond that, it wasn't my desire. Not really wanting to be a film producer either. I was always good at two things: writing and talking. And those two things work very well as an attorney. So I knew business was my route.
All right. All right. And so who are your clients? Is it writers, producers, actors, directors, grips, all the above?
It's primarily above the line. So writers, directors, producers, actors. And then on the new media side, you know, we represent a lot of social media influencers.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's mostly two realms: social media and then film and TV.
Film, TV. But, you know, there's a lot of other realms. You know, there's podcasts, there's music, there's, you know, apps that are somehow tied to entertainment. You know, we do a lot of intellectual property work.
Okay.
Filing and protecting trademarks, licensing IP. So, you know, generally speaking, what we like to say is we're creative lawyers for creative folks.
Fair enough. So, and there's so much crossover these days, and, you know, actors may be musicians, or they may,
Correct.
Want to do art or fashion design. So is that where you kind of, things sort of branch out? I mean, is there any instance where you're like, okay, let me bring in another attorney, or are you able to kind of help in all those spaces?
You know, if it's something that I feel that there's somebody that's better equipped to handle, I absolutely make that referral.
Okay.
I have, you know, it's a boutique firm. My team is myself, two associates, and then we have 3 contract lawyers. And those 3 are kind of specialists in different things. One is music, one is film finance, and one is like general entertainment law. So we're able to help a lot of people, and anyone that we don't feel is a good fit, I have a really nice network of lawyers that I can refer to.
Okay. And I think I heard you mention on another podcast that you don't do video games.
I do not. That is a very kind of niche area, and that's not really my space.
Fair enough. So that, in that instance, you're referring that out. I
am definitely referring that out.
Okay.
Yes.
And in the rare cases where clients get into, let's say, trouble with the law, same thing, you're referring that out, or are you representing them there as well?
No, that's, you know, we write contracts, we negotiate them. We don't do criminal law or anything else. No.
And so how does a lawyer fit in with the manager, the agent, that whole ecosystem? Can you explain that for people?
Yeah, a lot of people who are not in the business are a little bit confused about what everyone's role is. So I will say that, you know, a manager's job is to guide your career. An agent's job is to find you work and set up meetings for you. And then a lawyer's job is to negotiate your deals and protect you. So we're all in a very different lane.
So the agent will find the deal, let's say, for somebody to act in a movie, and then you come in once the person has been selected for the role.
Right. And then the manager will kind of help you and guide you, say, hey, you should focus on this niche because your writing in this area is really good and this is what's hot, or this project is better than that one. Kind of like, getting you focused, almost like an accountability partner.
Okay. So if, let's say somebody's like, all right, you're a better character actor or whatever, or this role is going to be damaging to your career.
Correct.
That's the manager's
That's
side.
the manager.
The agent's going to get you that role within whatever niche the manager suggests is right for you. And then once they get that role, you're going to bring it to the finish line.
Absolutely.
And so what could you walk us through, I guess, from a film treatment to distribution, that kind of whole process, and where you fit in as a lawyer?
Sure. Yeah. So, most of the time, people bring me in the very early stages of development of a project. So when they are, for example, if they're a producer, they're bringing on a writer. We will, help them with that contract. If they want to attach talent, they need attachment agreements. And then kind of simultaneously, they're usually looking for financing, especially if it's an independent film. So we'll put together, kind of what the structure of the offering is to the investors. Once you have your financing, you've got your talent, you've got your final script, you're ready to go into production. And then at that point, what we're doing is we're doing what's called production legal. So we're doing all of the contracts for the film. After the film is in the can, which means it's done, the next step is distribution. And you will generally, start getting offers. And once you've found a company that you feel is going to be a strong partner for you, they'll give you a distribution agreement. And we as entertainment attorneys negotiate that contract.
And what do you mean by distribution agreement? Are we talking where the film will actually play in terms of the cinemas?
The distribution deal is for, licensing rights. So it's rights on various formats, streaming formats, theatrical, schools, airplanes.
Airplane. Yeah. That I didn't realize. All right. So if somebody, let's say they're bringing a film to Sundance, that's where they're getting that distribution deal. Is that
generally they're if they're showing their film there, they're looking for a buyer, a distributor.
Okay.
And once, an offer is made and, they feel like they found the right partner, then they'll bring the contract to us.
And so how do you find, it sounds like you've got a lot of, not necessarily on retainer, but clients that are using you repeatedly for project after project. Where are you finding new clients? Is it by word of mouth? Is it about networking with agents and managers?
It's a little bit of everything. I have been in the business for a while, so yes, a lot of it is repeat clients. There's also, referral partners that are generally going to be people that are in the business, managers, maybe other lawyers that don't do entertainment, but they do some kind of IP. And then film festivals, Sundance is one of them. Coming up in 2 weeks is South by Southwest. I'll go to that. And and at those festivals, I usually meet a lot of amazing filmmakers, and some of them become my clients.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you make the rounds of, I mean, you're in Toronto, you're in Sundance, you're in South by in Austin.
Yeah, because you need to go where your target is, and that's where they are. That's their that's the ecosystem.
And I know all your clients are your favorite and all genres are your favorite. Is there something that's closer to your heart in terms of movies or TV?
I mean, I have to say that, I have a soft spot for documentary filmmakers.
Oh, wow.
It's such a hard thing to do, to make a documentary. They need a lot of support. And most of the documentaries are about some kind of social impact. And so I really try to, do favors for those documentary filmmakers if I can.
And I'd imagine there's a lot more law involved in a documentary film as opposed to people acting. Is that the case, or?
There's a lot of what's called analysis of fair use.
I see.
And so, yeah, there is a lot more kind of IP stuff that pops up in documentaries.
Tell us without getting too much into the weeds. Tell us about fair use laws.
So basically, it's without getting into the weeds too much, it's whether or not you have to get a license to use certain footage in your film, and if the film is, educational, and the way that you use the footage is transformational, then you can argue that it's fair use, and therefore you don't need to pay a license to use it.
I see. What, though, makes something considered to be transformational? It seems like there's such a gray area there, which lawyers don't generally like.
Yeah. So you're 100% right. And there is no black and white on that. I mean, there's like a million cases out there where you look at the facts and you're like, how is this transformative and this one isn't? There is no, nobody can really say 100%, what it is. It's very case by case.
I saw a great documentary I was watching with my wife the other night. It takes place in LA. It's about and I'm forgetting the title, but it was nominated for an Academy Award for documentary short, and was in the LA school district, and it was the repair department for all their musical instruments.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It was a really, really good movie. And it was like 25 or 30 minutes. And the folks that made a career out of repairing instruments. My guess is because they all work for the LA school system and they're, showing their career repairing instruments. There's not a lot of fair use laws in place there, but a great documentary, a nice social piece as well. So when should folks use a lawyer? When not to? I feel like there are cases.
When not to?
Yeah. Never. I mean, I do feel like there are cases where too early, maybe when you're working with friends or family, that it could be seen as off-putting. But then again, maybe that's exactly when you want to use a lawyer.
That's really unfortunate that you're saying that, because that's where all the problems are right there.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate how many times I've seen people that are so-called friends who really didn't flesh out and figure out, what their deal was going to be. And because they didn't talk about it and figure it out, guess what? It turns out they weren't on the same page. They never had a contract. And then they do have to pay a lawyer to now come and untangle them from each other. Right. So friends and family, there is no friend or family when it comes to business. And this is a business.
Yeah. Yeah, sure is. I mean, and strange things happen when money's involved, and yeah.
People are fascinating when money's involved.
I mean, does it
say that?
Yeah. I mean, does it show, the true character of people, or does it just like another side of them? I mean, what are your thoughts behind that?
I think that most people, who are creative, can be emotional. And, okay, if they're putting their heart and soul into their art, they have every right to be a little bit, emotional about, how it's going to be exploited in commerce. And so I think the issue is that until someone goes through that, where they didn't have a contract and they saw the fallout when, things didn't go as planned, they don't really think that they need a lawyer early on. They think, oh no, it's just early stage, we don't need attorneys. But the problem is that that's the foundation of the project. And so if you don't structure things right from the beginning, and people are not on the same page from the beginning, it's really hard to move forward from that.
So you're saying, I mean, just having that basis, having that foundation in place will just make everything easier in the long
It
term.
will, because everybody knows exactly what their responsibilities are.
Right.
There's no confusion.
Right.
And anyone that you bring into the project is going to take you more seriously because they know
That's
that, oh,
interesting.
well, they have contracts in place. They're serious about this.
Right. Okay. So there's that imprimatur of professionalism from the get-go.
It really does come down to that. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to wrap their head around. But think about it. If I'm a, seasoned production company, I walk in and, you have zero contracts. It's not clear who owns the rights to the screenplay. It's going to be a little off-putting.
Right. I mean, it's like a headache waiting to happen.
Yeah, exactly. They want to get, they don't have time to waste.
Right. And they're professionals on their end, and they want to work with others that are professionals. Maybe you could talk about, obviously without naming names, but just interesting cases that you've dealt with, or cases that you feel like are uh, that come up a lot. I mean, you mentioned the Friends piece. Is there anything else that within the legal profession?
That's a really big one. I have to say, the other one that comes up a lot is a lot of independent filmmakers will get templates for contracts from the internet, or they'll get it from their friend that used it on another film. And then it's time to, license their movie, and the distributor is asking for all of these contracts. They have a laundry list of things that they want. Number one, they don't have half of them because they didn't even know what they are. Or number two, the contracts that they do have did not have the right language in them. So they have to be redone. So basically, we're coming in to kind of clean up. That happens quite a bit.
And so, I mean, is a good agent really the beginning of having your business affairs in order? I mean, I would imagine if you have a good agent, the agent's going to say, look, you need a lawyer. Even if this is an independent project and it's a smaller project, you're doing it with your friend, you especially need a lawyer here.
Yeah. Most people, well, here's the thing. So you're not going to get an agent until you're at a certain level.
Right.
Okay. So the people that I'm talking about, they're very new. They don't have agents. They don't have managers. They're kind of using this independent film to showcase their talent. Okay. So they don't really have other advisors. I'm probably the first time that they've talked to somebody who is, in that position to tell them how to do things the right way. Right. And again, they're coming to me sometimes after the film's already been shot. Wow. So, it's, I think that, once somebody is at the level of having an agent, 90% of the time they're going to have a lawyer, or the agent's going to immediately connect them to a lawyer.
Okay. So in other words, having an agent is a good thing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's the key to progressing with your career.
Right. And it sounds like not having an agent is not willful. It's just until you've gotten to that certain threshold.
You've got to, agents are in the incoming call business, right. And so you have to, you've got to kind of spark their interest. You've got to do something to get on their radar.
And do you refer out clients to agents as well? I mean, do you see somebody that's, really up and coming and saying, hey, this person is I've got a feeling about them?
Most of the people that come to me already have an agent or manager. Sometimes what will happen is they don't necessarily feel that their agent or manager is a fit, and that maybe they'll ask me to introduce them to someone else. But, that's really not my job. I always can try to help people as much as I can, make introductions. But, again, agents and managers, they're creative. They know what's hot and what's not. I'm a business person.
Right. And speaking of business person, speaking of what's not your job, but I'd imagine often becomes your job, is that coaching piece. And I mean, you often hear of it, we're talking creatives who may not be the best money managers. They're not going to be people who are going to be saving for retirement in the same way. You hear the horror stories of, I don't know, Wesley Snipes, Nicolas Cage, who had 15 homes and he squandered $150 million fortune. Have you encountered those cases? And what is your counsel in those situations?
Well, I once my clients get to a certain level, if they don't already have a business manager and financial advisor, I definitely introduce them.
Okay.
I think those are two critical, advisors that you should have when you get to a certain level in your career. But yeah, I mean, I've dealt with lots of clients that, were having financial issues. It's kind of common when you have a certain lifestyle and then, maybe your income goes down, but your lifestyle doesn't go down with
Right.
it.
Right.
They call it lifestyle inflation, and it's a
Sure.
big issue in Hollywood.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess it's always trying to keep up with the Joneses in some respects as well.
Yeah, I mean, everyday folks do the same thing. So of course, if you're a star athlete, it's no different.
Okay. And do you work with athletes at all, or?
I do not.
Okay.
No.
And so you've been in the entertainment industry for 20 years. Tell me, and you're working with cycles of new actors coming in, and who are moving on from the industry. What have you felt are like surprisingly solid and stable, but also money making roles within the entertainment industry that people outside would be surprised to hear about?
That's a really good and interesting question. Um, I mean, I would say that surprisingly, social media has been an amazing place for, um, entertainers, who are trying to kind of become a brand,
Right.
and using their celebrity to endorse other brands. That's been enormous the last couple of years.
Right. And so maybe you could talk about working with influencers, and there is that whole influencer economy, and it's so different in that you can be your own boss in some respects, but then there are also companies that manage influencers as well. Can you talk about
Yeah.
those kind of different paths? And
Yeah. I mean, so a lot of people don't intend to become an influencer. They start creating content and then, you know, suddenly, they've got something that is of mass appeal. They grow their followers. And then if it ties into a certain niche, for example, like fitness, they'll start getting recognized by a fitness company who's maybe coming out with a new line of clothing and they want them to promote it for them. So there's a lot of influencers that they don't have a manager or agent. They have just come on to the brand's radar because most brands nowadays have a department that's focused on social media. And
right.
so you have people there that are kind of looking and seeing, okay, who's trending and can they help tell the story of this brand? There are also agencies that exist that find those opportunities.
Mhm.
The difference is if you have an agency working for you, you're going to pay them a 20%, 25% commission.
Right.
Not to say that that's a bad thing. It really just depends on, what space you're in and what you're trying to do.
And so what size following do you need to have to be considered a commodity?
Everybody asks me that, and I have seen people that only had 100,000 followers that there was a brand that was interested in them. Then there was another brand that said, "Oh, they only have 900,000. That's not enough for me." The
Wow.
thing about social media is it's the Wild West. There are no rules.
Right.
So people, it's not governed by any kind of guild or trade organization or anything. So it's truly the Wild West.
I've heard that the more niche you are, the better in some respects, because you're more able to find kind of that wrapped follower who's more likely to buy the product versus something that's super broad.
I think that's with any business. Nobody wants a jack of all trades, right?
I know. I mean, that's the thing in podcasting is they say you want to have a niche podcast. Here I am all across America, and I'll be meeting with somebody who runs a Greek diner in a couple weeks, so it is very broad, and that's something that I'm working through, but that's who I am and what I want. So I guess I'll have to have 1 million followers.
But the common thing is people's stories,
Yeah,
so
that's it.
Their personal journey.
Right. Well, that's exactly it. So talk about working with podcasters and what can podcasters do to protect themselves. I mean, we don't have those contracts in a way, but we often have guests on the show. We talked about trademark.
Yeah, I mean, most of the podcast deals that I do is when someone is producing a podcast for somebody else. So it's like a work for hire situation. So, you get to a certain level, the mechanics of a podcast, and a third party is going to hire you. Hey, Mark, produce my podcast.
Okay.
Then I'm negotiating your contract. Does that make sense?
Yes. And so this is like with iHeartRadio or something.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
And so, when before the show, we just went through a couple, simple particulars, and you were like, okay, cool, let's go. Should somebody in my position have waivers to sign and all that? What is your recommendation on that?
I mean, yeah, you could certainly have a very simple waiver. I think that with your podcast, it's, the likelihood that you're going to do something weird with this content. I mean, I don't really see it happening.
No.
Yeah.
Pretty PG rated. I mean, you never know.
Yeah. I think if it was something a little bit more risque, then maybe you would need some kind of release signed by the guest. But this is pretty cookie cutter G stuff.
Yeah, I like to say maybe PG. G is a little too family friendly, but PG rated. But yes.
Well, so far it's been G.
So far it's been G. We'll have to spice things up in our last 15 minutes. But that's good to know. And I met with a journalist friend of mine who was on the podcast last year, and he was a journalist for 30 years before he started his podcast, and he's never done waivers. And one of his thoughts behind it is it can kind of taint the relationship. And, we talked about that a little bit earlier. It is, when dealing with family, but that's such a bigger issue when you're producing a film with somebody versus appearing on an hour-long podcast. And I feel like so much.
Here's the thing. This podcast isn't being commercially exploited, right?
Okay. How do you mean by commercially exploited?
Are you making money from this podcast?
Not yet.
Exactly. So for now, I don't think there's an issue. Maybe when you get to that next level,
okay,
and you are, then at that point, and then maybe if your topics get a little bit more in the realm of things where people are going to be concerned about how they're being presented, then you may want to get something in place. But I think for what you have right now, I don't think you need anything.
It's okay. And I do have an LLC set up. Is that a recommended course of action for podcasters? And,
I mean, I think that everyone who's doing any kind of business, especially in media, wants to have like a corporate veil. Okay. It's, it protects your assets. So yeah, I'm always going to be in favor of having an LLC or a corporation.
And for people listening, folks think of an LLC and they're like, oh, that must be so difficult to set up. My plumber has an LLC. It's not that big of a deal. It's fairly easy to do. So maybe we could talk a little bit more about negotiation. I'm always fascinated by negotiation, and, maybe you could walk us through that process. And, of course, there's always what the person is getting, their rate, I guess you would call it. But then there's the contingencies, there's the back end stuff. Can you talk about all that?
So, yeah, I mean, with any kind of, contract, you're going to get an initial offer. And as an artist, you're always going to want each deal to get a little bit better than the last one. So kind of what we always try to do is we try to look at, okay, what is the precedent? How much were they paid on the last project? What kind of, like you said, back end did they get? Did they get 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, five? And so we want to kind of come up with, okay, this is the floor. We're not going to do this unless we at least get this minimum. And there are a lot of projects that artists do where maybe they're more flexible because they really love it. So you always have to kind of like gauge, what is your client's ultimate goal? Is it just, hey, I really want to do this and I'm willing to be flexible, or no, I'm really doing this for a paycheck. If it's not this amount of money, I'll walk away.
Is that a question that you're asking? Is that like, what do you want to get out of this project?
Yeah, that's a big part of the conversation with the clients. What are their goals? I think that to be a good lawyer, you have to understand what your client's goals are.
And so I'm sure all this protected by attorney-client privilege, you hear a lot of the backstories behind why people are doing bad movies.
Sometimes you don't know it's going to be a bad movie, though.
That's true.
You don't always know. Things can change, from a script to the actual completed film. So
fair enough. Yeah. And so you mentioned points. Can you talk about that? What do you mean by points?
You said back end. Points are just another name for back end, and then another name is contingent compensation.
Okay. So we're talking a piece of the net profits.
Yes, correct.
All right. And so a point is you're getting 1%, you're getting 2%.
Correct.
And so, what have you seen? What's the range? If you're a big A-list star, is it also a sliding scale? I will get more points on the back end because I feel this is going to be a more successful movie and I'll take a lower salary. How does that all play out?
Yeah, if you are not able to pay the talent what their normal rate is, then a way that you can kind of compensate for that is giving them a bigger percentage on the back end. Really big stars, obviously, that number is going to go up. Smaller talent, you can be a little bit more conservative. There is no formula for this. This is why it's called independent film. It's independent. There's no rules. It's project by project.
Right. And then to just walk us through a negotiation. Are some of these, distributors playing hardball? Have you seen it all as a lawyer and nothing phases you, and you kind of have to counsel the client and, have those difficult phone calls and kind of talk them off the ledge?
At this stage in the game, most of my clients are pretty seasoned and they kind of know the lay of the land. I think the less experienced clients always have a more difficult time, kind of understanding, kind of how the business works because they just haven't done it. And so it can be a little bit of a hit to their ego the first or second time around when maybe they're not getting the offers they were expecting for their films. So as you progress in this business, I think that actually the negotiations get easier because you're familiar with, what are the kind of standards, the industry standards.
And you mentioned walking away. In what situations have you seen clients walk away or the other side walk away, or you've counseled your client to just step away from a deal?
I think that one of the big factors of deciding to step away from the deal is if somebody is already kind of showing signs at the contract negotiation stage that they're not going to be a good partner. Maybe there's a personality conflict. Maybe there's lack of flexibility. Maybe somebody is non-responsive, or the deal is like dragging on. And so you can kind of like get a sense of, oh, they're not really invested in this. It's a lot of those psychological pieces and personality pieces that end up killing deals.
Really? Okay. So, it's there's always that business component, but so much of it is, you're going to be working with somebody for a good stretch of time. Okay. All right. Any thoughts, any advice for people who are getting started in the business, or people who are interested in, pursuing the entertainment lawyer as a career?
So for anyone getting started in this business, I tell everyone the same thing. This is a relationship business. You have to know people, and that means that you have to get out there. You're not going to meet people staying at home. Go to events. When you meet people at events, follow up with them, set up coffees, set up Zooms. Nowadays we have Zoom. It's a lot easier than before to connect with people. And you have to be diligent in those relationships. You have to nurture them. You have to stay on top of mind with those people. For entertainment law, and any kind of law, to be honest, I always suggest that people go and work for a law firm and see, is this something that I really want to do? Because a lot of times our image of what a lawyer is comes from film or TV shows, and it's not reality. And I don't suggest that anyone, go through the kind of arduous process of applying to law school, taking the LSAT, and then sitting, in a classroom for the California 3 years.
Bar. Yeah.
And then having to pass the California bar, unless, they are like, okay, yes, this is exactly what I want to do. This is my passion.
Right. You mentioned Zoom, and I've heard from other lawyers that litigation, just appearances in court, have been reduced since the pandemic. Have you found that to be the case? Do you litigate on behalf of clients?
I don't do any litigation. We only do contracts. So yeah, not the right person to ask. Sorry.
All right. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Nina. How can people find out more about you?
So yeah, you can check us out on our website, www.amerilawpc.com. We're very active on Instagram. Our handle is Ameri Law PC. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, Nina and Ameri Esquire. You can also find us on TikTok, Ameri Law PC. So there's also quite a few videos on YouTube that are educational, that are about entertainment law, and you can find those under Nina and Ameri.
All right. And one last question. PC, what does that stand for?
Professional corporation.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Well, Nina, thank you so much for joining us, and really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.